Oh yeah, here. So here's like my cousin. She grew up in the village too, so she's teaching everyone how to make tamales. Here's our little table of our tamale making. This is the backyard. The persimmon tree always ripens right at this time, so it's also beautiful. We give away these persimmons as as part of the day. Let's see. Yeah, the kids are involved. The kids also help make the fire using traditional friction fire techniques. Making pupusas. And we have music. Oh yeah, that's another part that at the grave sites, the mariachis walk around and you can hire them to play your relative a song. And I was like, oh, I wish I could do that. And a friend of mine, Robin, had been in El Salvador and she'd learned some of the songs. And I was like, you don't happen to know this song? And she's like, yeah, I do. And so she sang it at the event for my dad. So I don't know if you guys could hear the audio. Probably not. Okay. All right. Yeah. But yeah, it's just and here you can see the names on the tree. And at the end of the evening, it said that they have a good party, they hang out, they got the ancestors come and they hang out and gossip with you. But at the end of the day, they need to go. So a lot of people have a sweeping kind of ceremony where they say, all right, thank you for coming, time to go. And so what we do is we read the names off at the end of the night and then put them in the fire and just say, thank you for coming, time to go. And so that's just another way to kind of say, we don't want them to, let's say, overwhelm our time and space. They kind of had their time, but we do welcome this visit and this time. And but in the end, they have to go. So that's just a little part of what we do. Yeah, those are the main things I think I wanted to share.
One thing that I really like about the celebration is the vibrant colors and like the little details that really go into planning and like honoring the dead.
Yeah, no, it's a lot about that beauty and just really yeah, people take a lot of pride, especially in the painting the grave sites. They'll come the day before and pull all the grasses and really make them real beautiful. Yeah, so I just love that part too. It actually was so striking to me when I first saw a cemetery here where they were all just gray, and I was like, oh, that's awful. Like, don't they have anyone that loves them?
Yes, thank you for sharing these photos. One question that also popped up while you were speaking was, as we all know, that COVID has impacted the entire world, but how do you think COVID has impacted the day or just traditions of celebrating ancestors during this time?
Yeah, no, that's a really tough one. I was kind of joked that I thought when kind of the world was having trouble or revolution was happening that we'd at least gather and be with each other. But COVID has certainly made that difficult. It in a way, being able to set up an altar at home, I think is a replacement for that cemetery time, let's say. So I think that's a really useful thing to do. Yeah, we don't want to cause more death because we gather either, right? So yeah, I think maybe it's also in a way also made us face our own like mortality, whether we're old or young. And so I think it's in a way it's very topical to think about Dia de los Muertos, especially during COVID. Just so many people that have gone because of it, and none of us are really immune to it. So kind of like what stories are you leaving, and what traditions are you leaving is a good question to hold.
And I kind of just want to say thank you so much for this, because I am Mexican, but I've never uh, celebrated the Day of the Dead this way. I've only done like Halloween, but that's like not even like related, you know? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just think that it like allowed me to see what it actually means and the traditions that come along with it, which I like knew a little bit about, but like definitely not to this detail. And it's definitely something that I will be participating in.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think throughout, especially Latin America, it's that kind of oppression of some of the culture things is real, you know, and um, people didn't necessarily want us to reconnect with that past because it's like they wanted to break it and kind of, and I think in a way we have to rethink the idea of a melting pot. You know, because in a way that's what it's encouraging is like, oh, we'll just kind of melt all these things together and make a new color, you know. I think we have to somehow keep our strands and the beauty, but surely, you know, weave together. And I think we have a lot to offer. So um, you know, ask your family members some of their traditions and their stories and their recipes, and it's a I know a lot of people, let's say of European or Irish descent, that really crave that connection also to their own history, but maybe it's really far back and they can't even pinpoint, you know, where they're from. And so I think it's a real blessing to still have that little clue, that little thread waiting for you to kind of pull on it. So I highly encourage you. Are you speaking? It looks like you might be on mute, Claudine.
I was kind of like in thought because I don't know. I just keep having thoughts pop up while you speak. Um, One thing that I was thinking about, okay, if it can come back to me, um, man, this I really just had a thought and it just left me. What was it? Man, okay, if it comes back to me, then I'll ask it
No
again.
problem.
But yeah, Alexis, did you have any questions? Totally okay if you don't. But yeah, I guess one good way to end our discussion would be kind of sharing how we each have come into experience with honoring our own ancestors. If everyone would be willing to share, I can go first. I know in my family, I really, well, also similar to you, Roberto, I didn't experience much death growing up until like when I left for college. And I feel like the death that hit most close to home was like when my grandfather died, and
Mm,
when I was a junior in college. And then like seeing, I got to really see like how my family goes about honoring him. And yeah, so after our funeral, it was after his funeral, it was there was it 14-day or like a month later, we
mm,
do another gathering of just like prayer and eating. Everyone loves to eat and gather.
yeah.
And then there's also the 1 year death anniversary that my family honors. And we just come back together, just mainly immediate family, but I'm sure other families do more bigger celebrations. Um, and I believe my family's traditions are tied into more religious beliefs. But I also know that my mom mentioned that in the Philippines, people have a similar celebration, and I think it's
Hmm.
called All Souls Day or All Saints Day,
Yeah.
where people also go to the cemetery and eat. Um, but yes, not. I feel it could be related to Dia de los Muertos.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
or
Mhm.
stemmed from because I know in the Philippines there was history of like Spanish colonization, so that might have been an
Yeah.
influence from that.
Yeah, they kind of wrapped it all up in All Saints Day,
Hmm.
but it's, you know, everyone had those traditions and kind of put it all there.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, that's like my experience with yeah, honoring my ancestors. But oh, my thought popped back in.
All right.
One thing that I have been kind of thinking about was kind of thinking back about my lineage, and like I only know up to a certain point of like my ancestors. And when I like asked my parents, oh, do you know like how far back we go, and like but they can only remember up to maybe their grandparents or great grandparents. And yeah, I don't know, I think for me it would be nice to know like what specific region like
Mm,
my bloodline came from, or what indigenous groups maybe we stemmed from. But yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or like people I guess who are just in that kind of limbo of like, I wonder where I came from. And I know there's those ancestry tests, but I don't know how reliable those are.
yeah. I would say if you can, and it's hard in COVID, right?
Mhm.
Visit the homelands. There's so many little clues that pop up, and so many you'll never know. Like it could be the neighbor, of someone, or the bus driver, and it's pretty amazing how much my trips back have just like I found this like thread, this thing that I needed. So yeah, I highly recommend that.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I feel like I also kind of relate to that thought, like sharing our background with dealing with death. I've never experienced a funeral. I never had a death in my like immediate family or like people I know. And I think COVID has not helped, but like nudged me to accept or
Mm-hmm.
come to face with mortality. But also my grandma is like getting older, and my grandparents. I'm thankful that I have both my grandparents, but they're kind of getting older, and then so they oftentimes are like thinking about, what am I leaving behind for, my grandchildren, me and my
Mm-hmm.
cousins and my family and stuff like that. And so I think in COVID, I feel like I'm trying to reconnect back, like talk to my grandma specifically on my dad's side because she lives with us, and talk to my parents and ask like where did we come from, like what's our history, and kind of similar to Claudine with so much that has happened in El Salvador, like the Civil War, or my mom
Mm-hmm.
often talks about the big earthquake she experienced as a
Oh
child
yes.
that like moved her family away, and like that caused her to change her last name, and like all this stuff happened, and so she can't track down her relatives and all that stuff. And so like thinking about all that, I feel like in this pandemic has helped so much. You were talking about like people going through that. I've experienced that, and yeah, and then so that's my experience with like facing my ancestors and really wanting to know where I'm coming from and where my family's coming from.
Thank you.
I feel the same as Natalie. My family, well, we haven't had any like deaths in our family that I know of. But I feel like okay, I don't know. I feel like my brain is going everywhere. Um, I have like talked to my parents about like what they did when like someone passed away. Like I always like ask them like a lot of questions about this, because I feel like I've kind of lost connection with my culture. So it's really nice just like talking to them and hearing stories of what they used to do when they were back in Mexico. And yeah, it's definitely something I want to like reconnect with.
Um, I grew up pretty like American. I
You're
guess.
cutting out a little
Am
bit,
I cutting
or
out?
can you? I just maybe a little closer to the mic.
Um, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. This computer cuts it in and out sometimes, so hopefully it doesn't do that.
Oh yeah, it's kind of doing that.
Sorry.
Okay.
Can you hear me well enough?
Yeah, now you sound good. Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying that I grew up like pretty American with like Halloween and all kind of the conventional American types of holidays. there's not like my dad doesn't really have a connection to, or like a traceable connection to like relatives on his side, really. So I think that part of me was like needing some form of culture. And so I have like different personal rituals that I have developed over time to like move things through, to help like kindle like some unresolved things within myself related to like broken attachment systems and death and grief and like detachment from culture. And so I've developed like my own sort of culture kind of with yeah, just rituals that honor like life and death and cycles. I haven't had that many relatives that have passed away yet. I've had one. And on my mom's side, like they celebrate it in more of like that cold way, that way where you don't like commune with death, you kind of like you're much colder about it, and it's you kind of like tighten up a little bit to meet it. I think a part of me just has craved more of like, I think I do still have threads of like that indigenous past that sort of remind me that there's more, and that helped to lead me to like discover more and put some pieces together. So I think I commune with my ancestors by like cultivating the present moment and conjuring like a lot of that memory and like creating so that it's right in front of me. And then I think partly because we don't think about death that much, we don't know how to allow death to happen. And so I think like a big thing I've had to work with is like letting life cycles happen, like with any creations, like letting things go and let them run its course. I think that's one of the values of ritual and ceremony, is that you can, it's like a pathway for energy to move through and cycles. So incorporating some of that has been really important. And in my neighborhood, my neighbor just experienced a death and had like a crisis. And so it just like brought up like sort of thinking about how like we need to move grief through, and how like sometimes if we don't have a way of doing that, like the grief gets stuck in people who care about that person. And so how can like we facilitate like allowing death to happen and not becoming stuck at like not being able to like confront death, because I think when we don't confront it, we can't embrace how it transforms into other living forms and into the future.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think. I was, I guess I'm kind of weird. Like I get invited to like funerals now sometimes, and I'm like, oh, okay, good. I get to hear like a really deep, honest story about someone. Like it's. And my wife thinks it's a little weird that I've gotten to some of these where I actually don't know the person, but it really, it's that moment that people are at their most like vulnerable, and also it's like the most real in their life. And yeah, I think it's a kind of a beautiful day. It's like a kind of like you're saying, it's another ceremony. Like we celebrate births, but we don't really celebrate the death as part of that cycle. And I just my father-in-law recently passed, and I was there throughout the whole process. Stayed with him all night, and it was almost like midwifing, his death. And we had some songs that he liked, and we just really. His wife laid next to him, and she's Catholic, so she did a lot of rosaries over him, and I asked her if I could burn some sage, and so it was really, in a way it's terrible that someone's dying, but in a way it was his time, and it was kind of beautiful to be there for him. It was quite an experience to kind of be there for that. So yeah, I agree that those discussions, or even being open to listening to someone about death, is really important. And this holiday kind of opens that door. So I think if we reclaim it to not just be about scaring people and being ghoulish, they reclaim it to be about, exploring our relationship with death and our ancestry and our foods, and then I think we'll all be, it's a better world when we do that.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like a lot of it is, from what I'm hearing, is community and remembrance and those stories and just being together. And then so that kind of leads into our final question, kind of a two-parter. What would be the big takeaway from this conversation, I guess Dia de los Muertos in general, and how would you recommend celebrating the upcoming Dia de los Muertos in COVID?
Yeah, okay. For me, the big takeaway is that death is natural, and that we can learn even beyond someone's death. And so if we keep their little light kind of going, that they'll keep teaching us different things at different times, maybe not directly, but through a friend or a relative, or, but you really have to ask the questions. Like, people won't come up to you and tell them to you, because we're not in that larger community. So especially if your family is elsewhere, then it's really in a way up to you to make that connection. And like I said, you never know where this clue is going to come out that's going to knock you on your butt. And so always being kind of open and ready to catch those stories I think is really important. And even journaling and keeping that information is important to pass on to next generations or relatives, younger relatives, right? And so they need to see that normalization of death. So helping them, having them help you cook or make those cookies or whatever it is that your grandmother liked, but maybe they never met your grandmother. Maybe the cousin, is so young. So, but you can say, this is grandma's favorite recipe. I think is really important, so that it does normalize that, and it shows people that kind of our lives go beyond our own time frame. So for celebrating, I would say find some pictures, collect some stories, put the time, cry, wail if you need to. I think that's part of it. I know when I first did it in my community, I could barely talk because I had just lost my father, and some friends stepped in to help me. And then later, 3 years later, my friend's husband died, and then I was helping her through it, so she couldn't say much. But it's that, knowing that there's people there and that there's a space to do that is, better than counseling. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Thank you for that.